I have heard people say that sometimes you need to lose yourself to find yourself. I always thought that was the kind of thing people put on coffee mugs, the kind of soft, decorative wisdom you nod at and then forget. I didn't think it would happen to me inside a hospital room, hooked up to machines, with no memory of how I got there. But here we are. My name is Madison St. Clair. The first thing I noticed was the beeping. Steady, mechanical, indifferent. A sound that didn't care what you had been through or where you were supposed to be or what arguments you had left unfinished. It just kept marking time. Beep, beep, beep. I was alive. That's what it was telling me. The second thing I noticed was the IV needle in the back of my left hand, taped down flat. It didn't hurt. Nothing hurt exactly. I just felt hollow, like someone had poured me out and left the container. I looked around. Pale walls, a window with the blinds half drawn, afternoon light coming in flat and gray. A chair in the corner with a folded blanket on it that nobody appeared to be using. Machines I didn't recognize arranged around me like attendants. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how I had gotten there. For a moment, I just lay still and let myself exist, because existing seemed like enough. The strangest part wasn't the room. The strangest part was what I felt like I was leaving behind, feeling like I had been somewhere else. Not asleep, that's not the right word. Not dreaming either, not quite. It felt like I had been living. Fully, specifically, completely living. And the hospital room I was waking up into felt like the interruption. In that other place I was light. That's the only word for it. There was a particular kind of ease to moving through my days. I traveled often. And the travel felt like pleasure rather than obligation. In that other reality, I wore a long dress, white and yellow, the kind that moves when you walk. And I remember thinking, in that other life, that I had forgotten I owned anything that beautiful. But the moment I remember clearest, the one that kept pulling me back like a thread, was a window. A small studio apartment, morning light coming in so hard and generous it made everything look radiant. I was standing at the window in a place called Marblehead, a town just outside of Boston. I can say that now, Marblehead, and feel the words settle in my chest like something I've always known. Outside, the ocean. Not a dramatic ocean, not a postcard ocean. Just water, right there, honest and gray-green and present. The studio was small, one room really, a bed, a kitchen counter, a table near the window. But the light was extraordinary, the kind of light that makes a small space feel like a decision instead of a compromise. I wasn't waiting for anyone in that studio. That's what I remember most clearly. I wasn't listening for footsteps. I wasn't calibrating my mood to someone else's. I was just there, in the morning, in the light, with the water outside the window, and something in me was completely, quietly at rest. I came back to the hospital room in pieces. The shift in my heart monitor must have given me away because the door opened within seconds. A nurse came in moving quickly, took one look at me, and stopped. "Oh," she said, and then louder, over her shoulder, "She's awake." She crossed to the panel by my bed and pressed something. "Get Dr. Michaels." What followed was a controlled kind of chaos. People appeared. 2 nurses, then a third, then a woman in a white coat who I would later understand was Dr. Michaels. Hands adjusted things I couldn't see. Lights were aimed at my eyes. Someone took my pulse with 2 fingers while someone else was already asking me questions. What was my name? Did I know the date? Could I squeeze her hand? Could I follow the light? I answered what I could. My name. Yes, I think so. Yes. But I had questions of my own, and they kept getting buried under theirs. "Can someone tell me," I started. "When did you wake up? Just now? Did you feel any—" I'm trying to ask, can you rate your pain on a scale of— I had always been a patient person. People said that about me. Madison is so patient. Madison is so calm. I had spent years interpreting that as a compliment. But something about waking up in a room you don't recognize, not knowing what day it is, will recalibrate your patience very quickly. "Enough," I said it more sharply than I intended, not quite a shout, but enough to produce a brief, startled silence. I looked at the woman in the white coat. "Where am I? How did I get here?" Dr. Michaels was small, maybe 50, with close-cropped silver hair and the practiced calm of someone who had delivered difficult news many times. "You're at St. Nicholas Hospital," she said, "outside of Newark." I waited. "You were in an accident, Ms. St. Clair. A car accident." She paused. "You've been here for just over a month." The room went very quiet. Or maybe it had already been quiet and I was only now hearing it. A month. I turned the word over, looked at it from different angles. It didn't fit into anything that made sense. "My apartment," I said finally, "in Marblehead." I heard myself say it as if it were a reasonable thing to say, as if Marblehead were a place I actually lived. "Is someone taking care of my—" The nurses exchanged a look, the kind of look that people exchange when they don't want to be the one to speak. Dr. Michaels's voice was careful. "Ms. St. Clair, what's your last clear memory?" I didn't remember the accident. I told them that directly. No, whatever had happened on whatever road, on whatever night, that part was gone. There was no image, no impact, no moment of realization, just the window in Marblehead, and then this room. "Has anyone come to visit?" I asked. Another pause. "Has my family been here? My sister? My mother?" I was going through the list methodically, the way you do when you're afraid of the answers. "My brother Ron?" "Ms. St. Clair, James." His name came out before I had finished thinking it. And with his name came something like a door opening, memories rushing through the gap all at once. James. And then I remembered the argument. It hadn't been a complicated argument in the sense that complicated arguments have multiple positions worth defending. It had been the latest version of an argument we'd been having for weeks, the same argument wearing different clothes each time. I had been offered a promotion, a significant one, my company's Boston office, a senior role, more responsibility, more money, more room to do the work that actually interested me. The offer had a timeline. It needed an answer. The drive from Newark to Boston wasn't impossible. 4 hours by car, less by train depending on the day. Couples managed far longer distances and far greater complications. I had done the math. I had run the scenarios. I was not asking for something unreasonable. But James did not want me to go. He was careful about how he said it. He didn't say I forbid it or over my dead body. He said things like, "I just think the timing is off and can't you ask them to wait? And don't you think we should be making decisions together?" All of which, if you were listening from the outside, sounded like a man who simply loved his partner and wanted to stay connected. And maybe some of that was even true. But I had been listening from the inside. My mother called the day after I told her about the offer. She called from the kitchen of the house I grew up in, which I knew because I could hear the particular hum of her refrigerator in the background. "I don't understand why you'd want to leave when things are so good," she said. "James is a wonderful man, Madison. You don't throw that away over a job title." It wasn't a job title. I had tried to explain that. She had continued as if I hadn't spoken. My sister Nancy called the day after that. Nancy had her own way of doing things, which was to present the situation as if it were simply a matter of me not understanding what I actually had. "He adores you," she said. "Do you know how rare that is, to have a man who actually shows up?" I didn't point out that James's showing up had increasingly started to look like not letting me go anywhere. The only two people who had said go without conditions attached were my best friend Tiffany, who had never trusted James and never pretended otherwise, and my brother Ron, who simply said, "It's your life, Mads. You get to choose what to do with it." I had been thinking about that sentence a lot, lying in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. The argument that sent me out the door, the night I apparently got into my car and drove badly and ended up here, had started over dinner. I had brought it up again. I needed to give the Boston office an answer. I had asked James to tell me, plainly, what he was asking me to do. He pushed back from the table slightly, the way he did when he was choosing his words. "I'm asking you to consider what we're building here," he said. "That's all. I'm asking you to factor that in." I have factored it in. We could see each other almost every weekend. This doesn't have to be the end of us. Long distance changes things. Or we let it change things and we come through the other side. James, this is a real opportunity. I have worked for... I know how hard you've worked. That's not the question. Then what's the question? He looked at me. The question is whether what we have matters enough to you to make a sacrifice for. I sat with that for a moment. Why? I said very quietly. Is the sacrifice always supposed to come from me? He didn't answer that. He pushed his chair back further and said we could talk about it when I was being more rational. I remember standing up. I remember going to get my keys. I remember peeling out of the driveway with my hands shaking, catching the edge of the curb, nearly clipping someone's bumper when I turned off Green Street. I was crying. I was not paying enough attention to the road. I knew that even then. And then nothing. And then the dream, or reality, of Marblehead. And then this hospital room. The memories that came to me in the days after I woke up were not warm ones. I would lie in the dark, after the night nurse had come and gone, and let them arrive. Not the accident, I never got that back, but the smaller things. The accumulating pattern of small things, each one almost defensible on its own, adding up to something I could no longer ignore. There had been a gallery opening 2 years earlier, a friend of mine from school, her first solo show. I had been looking forward to it for weeks. James had mentioned, the morning of, that he had promised his colleagues a dinner. He hadn't said anything about it before. He mentioned it like an oversight, not like a unilateral decision. I assumed you wouldn't mind. He said, you don't even know those art people. I had said it was fine. It was not entirely fine, but I said it. We went to his dinner. The gallery opening came and went without me. My friend texted afterward, missed you tonight. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Then there was the weekend trip I had booked. I had planned it for months. A solo trip, something I had wanted for years. A writing retreat in the Catskills. Just me and my notebooks and 2 days of quiet. James found out through a coincidence. He saw the booking confirmation on my laptop. You weren't going to tell me? He asked. I was going to tell you, I said. I just hadn't yet. This is the weekend of my company's golf tournament. I was counting on you being there. It's a golf tournament, I said. I would just be sitting. You would be there, he said. That matters to me. I canceled the writing retreat. I sat at the golf tournament in the tent with the other partners and spouses, drinking mediocre wine and smiling at people I didn't know. It was a long afternoon. I spent some of it thinking about the Catskills, about what I might have written. I did not go to the Catskills that year, or the year after. My mother and sister arrived to my hospital room the next day. I heard Nancy before I saw her, her voice carrying down the corridor, rapid and certain, the way she moved through the world. They came in together, my mom Virginia first, with her hands already outstretched, already reaching for me. She took my face in both of her palms and looked at me for a long moment without speaking, which was, for my mother, a remarkable thing. Baby, she said. Just that. James was behind them. He had flowers. He held them slightly in front of him like he wasn't sure what to do with them, and when he came close enough, he set them on the table beside my bed and reached for my hand. Hey, he said. Hey, I said back. The room filled with the particular noise of people who love you but don't know what to say, so they say everything. Comfortable? Are you eating? The nurses were so nice. Weren't the nurses nice? Have you spoken to your doctor today? Nancy adjusted the angle of my pillow without being asked. My mother had already found the chair in the corner and dragged it closer to the bed. At some point during all of this, I surfaced from something, a half-sleep, or the strange floaty state that came over me sometimes between doses, and I was back there. The studio in Marblehead, the window, the water, gray-green and present below me, the light that touched everything the same. Is the window always like this? I said, without quite knowing I was saying it. There was a brief silence. What window, sweetheart? My mother's voice, close. I blinked. The hospital room reassembled itself around me. My mother, Nancy, standing. James at the foot of the bed, watching me with a careful expression. Nothing, I said. Sorry, I thought I was somewhere else. Nancy said gently, Where did you think you were? I hesitated. I didn't want to say Marblehead. I didn't want to see them look at each other the way the nurses had looked at each other. Just a dream, I said. Never mind. But later, when James had stepped out to get coffee and my mother was nodding off in her chair, Nancy leaned forward and asked quietly, "What's in Marblehead?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I'm not sure," I said, which was true and also not true at all. I was discharged on a Friday morning. There is a particular feeling to leaving a hospital, the unfamiliar weight of your own clothes, the strange freshness of air that isn't recirculated, the slightly underwater quality of the first few days. The world looks both ordinary and completely new, the way things look after a fever breaks. James was there to drive me home. He had cleaned the apartment while I was gone, really cleaned it, the kind of cleaning that involves moving furniture, which is not something he would normally have done and which I recognized as a gesture. I said it looked wonderful. He squeezed my hand. For a few days things were gentle between us, and then they weren't. It happened around the third week. I had been home long enough that James had stopped treating me like someone who might break and had started being, again, simply James. I was on the phone with my friend Tiffany, making plans to meet for lunch the following week. Nothing unusual. James, who had been in the next room, appeared in the doorway. He waited until I glanced up at him, then mouthed, "We have that thing Thursday." I held up a finger and said into the phone, "Thursday works, actually. Let me just—" He shook his head. "We have that thing." "James," I said, covering the phone. "What thing?" "My co-worker's retirement dinner. I told you about it." I had absolutely no memory of him telling me about a retirement dinner. I also recognized that pressing this point on the phone with Tiffany would turn into something larger than a lunch scheduling conflict. "Let me call you back," I told Tiffany. I put the phone down. I looked at James. "You didn't mention a dinner?" "I mentioned it twice." "I was in a coma," I said. "For a month. Whatever you told me before that, I may not have—" "I told you about it last week, after you came home." There was a long pause. I thought about the Catskills and the writing retreat I had not gone to. I thought about the gallery opening and the friend I had disappointed. I thought about the fight over Boston and the way he had called me irrational and left the table. "I'll let Tiffany know," I said. I sat with the phone in my lap after he left the room. I thought, I'm very tired. The call from work came on a Tuesday morning while James was in a meeting. My colleague Sasha, warm and careful, asking how I was doing, saying that everyone had been thinking of me, that there was absolutely no pressure. And then, at the end, "I don't know if this is the right time to ask, but the Boston offer, it's still on the table. It doesn't need an answer today. We just wanted you to know it's still there if you want it." I had been sitting by the window when she called. The window in our Newark apartment looks out onto a parking garage. It's not a bad view exactly. It's just not a view of anything. I thought about the studio in Marblehead, the water below the window, gray-green and present, the way the light came in so flat and generous in the mornings, how I had been standing there alone, not waiting for anyone, not listening for anything. "Yes," I said. "I'm still interested." James did not take it well. I had expected that. I had tried to think through how to raise it, gently, with care, in a neutral moment. I told him during dinner on a Wednesday, with both of us seated, the table between us. He put his fork down. "You called them back?" he said. "They called me. They wanted me to know that the offer still stood." "And you said yes." I said I was interested. I said I wanted to talk about the logistics. Without talking to me first. "I'm talking to you now." He was quiet for a long moment. "So we're doing this again." "We never finished doing it," I said. "I was in a coma. It didn't actually get resolved." "I know that, Madison." His voice had a flatness to it that I recognized. "I think what I need to know is whether you've already decided." I thought about how to answer that. I thought about all the times I had not answered that, had softened the answer, had revised the answer to make it easier. "Yes," I said. "I think I have." He stood up. He walked to the window, the same window with the parking structure, stood with his back to me for a moment. "Then I need you to tell me something. he said without turning around. Because I can't do the long-distance thing, Madison. I've told you that. So if you're choosing Boston, tell me what that means for us. He finally turned. I looked at him, at his face, which I knew very well, which had been handsome and familiar to me for 4 years. I think, I said carefully, it means I'm choosing Boston. He said nothing for a long moment. Then I think you need to really consider what you're giving up. I have considered it, I said. That's what a coma gives you, a lot of time to consider things. He didn't have an answer for that. He went to the bedroom. The door didn't quite slam, but it wasn't soft either. I sat at the table for a while after he left. On my phone, without thinking about it much, I opened an apartment search. Marblehead area, waterfront, studio. The 4th listing stopped my breath. It was a small studio on the 2nd floor of a building 2 blocks from the water, morning-facing windows, high ceilings, available end of month. The listing photo showed the window, and beyond it, through old glass that probably let in drafts in February, a slice of gray-green ocean. And I sat there with the phone in my hands, my heart doing something loud and insistent. A warmth moved through my chest that I couldn't explain and didn't try to. I read the listing again, then a 3rd time. The windows, the light, the slice of water visible through old glass. I kept waiting for it to be different than I remembered, for the details to shift, for the dream to prove itself wrong. It didn't. I thought, this cannot actually be real. And then I thought, but it is. There you are, I thought. My mother called the next morning before I had gotten out of bed. He told me, she said. No preamble. Madison, I need you to listen to me, because I love you and I am telling you that you are making a serious mistake. Good morning, Mom. Don't good morning me. James is devastated. He has been at that hospital every single day. I know that. And now you want to just walk away from what you have because of a job. It's not about the job, I said. I sat up in bed. I looked at the parking structure. Mom, it's not about the job. Then what's it about, Madison? What exactly is so wrong with your life that you need to blow it up? I thought about the studio, the window, the morning light, the water. Nothing is wrong with my life, I said. I just think it belongs to me. She went quiet for a moment. Then, I don't know what that means. I know, I said. I know you don't. Nancy, my sister, called an hour later. Then Nancy again that afternoon. The 3rd call I let go to voicemail. I already knew the shape of the message before I listened to it. Variations on the same thing. James is a good man. You almost died. Doesn't that change anything? Why would you throw this away? Ron, my brother, called that evening. So you're doing it, he said. I'm doing it. Good. A pause. I can borrow a truck. I'll bring Terrence. That was all. That was everything. I did not take much. The things that had been mine before James, the good lamp, the books, the kitchen table I had bought secondhand before we moved in together, my clothes, my notebooks, the small print my grandmother had left me, wrapped in a sweater in a box. Ron and Terrence loaded the truck in 2 hours, while I did a slow walk-through of the apartment. I wasn't looking for things I had forgotten. I was just looking, saying goodbye to the version of myself who had lived there, the one who had canceled the writing retreat, who had skipped the gallery opening, who had cried driving out of that driveway and wasn't paying enough attention to the road. I hoped she knew she was allowed to go. Marblehead in October is a different thing than Marblehead in the brochure. The tourists are mostly gone. The harbor sits quieter. The light changes every 20 minutes, bright, then flat, then the particular pale gold of late afternoon on the water. The drafty windows in my studio let in a faint sea smell that I am already, 2 weeks in, completely unable to imagine living without. The studio is small. 1 room, really. A bed, a kitchen counter, a table near the window. Almost exactly as I had seen it in my coma dream. I have put a chair by the window. I sit there in the mornings with my coffee, looking out at the ocean, which does not care what I have been through or what I gave up or whether any of it was the right choice. It just sits there, gray-green and honest and present. I didn't choose the accident, nor the coma, nor the month I spent suspended somewhere between my life and the version of it I apparently needed to see. I didn't engineer the dream as a message. I don't think I'm the kind of person who gets sent messages, but I think there's something true in what happened. When the noise went away, James's voice, my mother's worry, Nancy's certainty, all the pressure of being loved by people who wanted me to stay, something underneath it got loud enough to hear. I had known, for longer than I wanted to admit, that I was standing at the wrong window. Not anymore. The ocean moves outside the glass. The morning light comes in flat and generous, touching everything the same. I sit in my chair in my yellow and white dress. I found it, finally, hanging in the back of a box I hadn't opened in 2 years. And I don't wait for anyone. I am here. That turns out to be enough. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe.